from 20. This project was conducted in 2023, but in fairness, we've not given one of these presentations before about our results or anything. So I think it's no harm to do it now. Yeah, I'm just joined in this talk by one of my colleagues, Jens Lindström, who was basically running the remote sensing, the site scan sonar survey that we carried out. So during this presentation, I'll kind of hand over to him to discuss those elements, and we'll sort of jump back and forth between us ourselves. So I'm sure everybody knows where Þingvellir is, but just in case you're joining from outside of Iceland, it's pretty much where the point is on the map. We were looking at the northern and northeastern shores of Þingvallavatn, which was pretty much the area that the park within the national park, within the Þingvellir National Park. So this location is extremely significant, both domestically in Iceland and also internationally for both cultural, geological reasoning. You have the establishment of the Althingi there in 930 AD, and also the tectonic plate divide between North America and Eurasia, which apparently is opening at a rate of 2 centimeters per year. And we'll talk a little bit more about the complexity of the geology there and working in those zones. This is kind of a close-up of where we were doing the project. Here you can see, the lake is quite large. It's 84 square kilometers in size. I think it's up to 114 meters deep at its deepest point. So, I mean, we weren't, this project was not planning to take the entire lake in our 1 week survey, but we were mostly just hyper focused on the north end, the shallower areas. So from 1 meter down to 30 meters, that was our remit there. So this area has seen quite a complex series of geological volcanic processes happening from essentially the last, if I talk about the last 10,000 to 2,000 years or so. So we're basically trying to sort of pick out the cultural heritage from within that plane, and it's tricky enough to do that on land, in terrestrial archaeology, never mind underwater. Yeah, this is just one of our let's say good weather days out there. The water flat like a mill pond, a mirror, and that's quite important actually for one of the survey methods we were trying. Conditions are very sort of particular out there, I would say, and I've personally had diving experience and whatnot in the lake and surroundings for 15 years. So I've been out in all conditions, winter, summer. Just because it has good visibility underwater doesn't always make the process easier, I would say. So why choose Þingvallavatn of all places? Again, it's the largest natural lake in the country. There is strong archaeological potential there. There has been quite a bit of subsidence of the land around the lake. Some estimate up to 4 meters. It has the proximity to the historic Althingi site. Sorry, just going to silence that there. There's also other historical activities around the lake, and historical activity of using the lake for resources. So I think that always would lead us to think there's some potential there for remains associated with that. There hasn't been any previous large-scale underwater surveys conducted there, so that was a quite a strong reason for us to do something. It is a complex environment because of the geology. We can't escape it, basically. So our research questions were quite straightforward. We basically wanted to know, were there any submerged cultural remains present within the lake, and if there were, what remains? Is this playing, by the way? Can people hear me?
We can hear you, yeah.
Okay, grand, sorry. I just saw a pause on the screen there, so I wasn't sure. So our research questions were quite straightforward. Were there cultural remains present within the lake? If so, what remains exist, and what form did they take? Can a combination of remote sensing methods work effectively in such a complicated geological environment? And have former terrestrial archaeological features submerged over time, with the various seismic activities? So yeah, we had a week to address that more or less. So just a little bit about the project background. So this is what we kind of had to go with. Despite it being the largest lake in the country, there's been relatively little, I would say, bathymetric surveys done. We had this depth map of Þingvallavatn from 1958, which was produced here. You see it here on the left side. There has been, a steady increase in terrestrial archaeological registration surveys over the last 15 years or so in the national park, and I think there was a momentum to include underwater areas within that, more systematically, I would say, than just kind of isolated spots, let's say. There was a memo on underwater archaeological potential produced by Jorgen Denker, one of the team members of this project, and the park director, Einar Simonsen, back in 2010. So that was a real, kind of inspiration, I would say, directly for this project to lean on heavily. So that memo here, this is kind of a summary of what that memo established in terms of potential underwater archaeological areas, of potential research. So I'm only going to talk really about areas 3 and 4 today, which is what our survey was more focused on. But, there is definitely further potential to go back at some later point. I'll talk about that towards the end of the talk. But pretty much their memo identified 4 areas within the park remit. So area 1 was the River Oxorau. You had submerged ruins from the assembly, potential submerged ruins from the assembly period present there within the river. Area 2 were those open water fissures. I mean, we all know of, Silfra is probably the most famous of all of those, but there are actually quite a few others, I think up to 9 or 10 of those freshwater filled fissures, which may contain cultural material. Area 3 were the low-lying lakeshore areas, you see marked there on the image, and Area 4 were deeper water areas, I would say. And just to touch a little bit on those potential areas, I'm borrowing here some work from Gunnar Grímsson, who has basically been flying drones all over the park over the last few years, and we linked up on this project to use a lot of his data for the shallow water areas. So this is a drone image that he collected of the Oxorau River area here, and you can see in the image here, he has actually identified potential remains that are currently underwater in the river. So the river is basically widening, it's eroding its banks, and you actually have some remains now which were formerly on land are now submerged. So we went while we were there in 2023, we had a good look at these areas, and there's definitely potential for cultural remains here, I would say, that at some point could be looked at. So if we look here, area 2, so these were the fissures. There's one of the team members there, Jorgen Denker. He's one of the authors of the original memo that we based our surveys on. So the fissures are interesting, but I would say they're challenging from a survey perspective and limited in terms of what you could find in there. There's potential for depositions over the years, of course, associated with the assembly and and other activities around that, whether they're ritual or, you know, just dumping refuse or whatnot. I mean, I've been into a few of them over the years, and there are some animal bones, you know, randomly lying around. There may be other objects, but you know, it is a real tricky environment, I would say, to work in. Depths vary. They can go up to 50 meters deep in places. There's overheads. The rocks are unstable. Access and egress, so getting in and getting out, is a real issue. So when we were there, actually, we did take a provisional look at some of these areas, but we weren't jumping into them necessarily. We sent in an ROV, so this is a remotely operated vehicle. So it's basically an underwater drone. You can dive these down. This one can go to more than 100 meters deep, and this can stay underwater for several hours, 4 or 5 hours. So it doesn't need toilet breaks. It doesn't need to be paid even. So these are really useful tools now that are becoming very reasonably priced, you know. So in the olden days, these would be out of the budget of even you know, a well-funded project. But nowadays, these are essentially like the DJI drones that you fly in the air. These are very you know, reasonably priced. You can fit these also with different tools. So you can fit grabber arms and sonars and metal detectors on them. So, you know, I don't think I'm not trying to suggest they would replace a human diver ultimately, but they are definitely very useful tools to employ. So we also, you know, had some limited diving in these fissures during our project, but again, it was more just scenic rather than, I would say, research focused. So if we go back to the archaeological survey areas here, so areas 3 and 4 are pretty much what we were looking at in 2023. This is the area divided up into the two, I would say, main focus or method types. So you have drone survey and the sonar survey. So these were non-invasive. So that's the other thing to say, like, we weren't there excavating, you know, taking samples or trenching, or these are basically everything up to that point, I would say. And you know, that is naturally the next step. If something is uncovered, of course you want to sample and you want to date it and things like that. But you know, we can do a lot without invasive work. So yeah, so the area is about 7.5 square kilometers. So it's a sizable area that we covered. It's about 10% of the lake, I think. So we were, at the time, I remember during the survey, we were talking about how long would it take to survey the whole lake. I mean, it's very ambitious, but given a big enough boat, I think it would be very achievable. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the drone survey. Gunnar Grímsson here on the right side, he's completely responsible for that. So this is really his area, but I'll just mention it because we used some of his data, and you know, we followed up on some of the data points that he identified. So this approach was specifically employed in areas where the water depths were quite shallow, so you know, down to 5 meters, I would say, and where the water column visibility, so that's the transparency through the water, was the best. So with low reflection and sun glare. So Gunnar at the time was working as a ranger for the national park, so in Þingvellir. So he actually had great flexibility to show up on site during the ideal conditions and capture data with his drone. You see the drone there; it's a bit more substantial than the ones that you would, you know, normally see the tourists using, but this had capability for infrared and heat signatures as well, as far as I understand. So he was basically able to fly this over the current age of the lakeshore and capture areas, you know, and later analyze those for potential sites. So just on the left of the image here, you have 2 areas here, one on top with an arrow pointing. This is in Vaskot. So this is submerged rock wall, which I'll talk about a little later. So these are the different sort of images that he captured of those. The one in the middle is a circular feature that we later went to have a look at, which we think is potentially cultural in origin. So these are the locations of those two. So you have one just here on this part of the survey area and one around Vascoat here in the middle. So these are the two drone features Gunnar picked up. Now, he also told me when we were working out there that he had identified up to 4 or 5 freshwater springs from the thermal imaging that he conducted. So, you know, they potentially indicate locations which may have cultural activity in the past, you know, people coming to the assembly site, stopping to access them or whatnot. So I think what these drones can actually tell you and provide is quite interesting. It's not just physical cultural remains, but it may be a place where people move through the land. So this is one of the first features we went to have a look at. So this is over by a modern summer house, I guess, along the north side of the lake here. So this comprised the remains of a linear stone alignment. It's about 25 meters long and 1 to 1.5 meters wide. It's about half a meter deep as well. Currently, this isn't dated. I'm not even sure if it's archaeological. So this is kind of where we're at now. Whether we would, you know, suggest further testing on it. You know, we've suggested it could be a breakwater, 20th century in date or so. But you know, it's just an unusual feature, very linear, very you know, different from the surrounding area. So this is one he picked up that we wanted to have a look at. There was no artifacts around it to date it really any further, but this is the second area that he identified. It was a about 10 meter in diameter circular stoned enclosure, I would say. Again, it's not dated. This is in let's have a look. This is around Vascoat there, number 2. Similar to drone target 1, we weren't able to, you know, accurately date it. One interpretation that's been discussed is that it was maybe a fish trap, fish enclosure. There was some records in the Orknefnaskrá about these features in Vascoat, so it may be related to that. There's a car tire in the middle of it there. You can see that's not related to it, I think. But that whole area was actually quite full of modern rubbish and garbage from, I would say, from the last years of activity on that farm, which was in the 60s, 1966, I think it was abandoned. So there was a lot of material just in the water there, actually. So I'm going to move on to Area 4, which is the lake survey element. And so these are the deeper water sections that we used the remote sensing side scan sonar on. And these areas really dropped from where the drone survey depth stopped, so about 4 or 5 meters, down to 30. That was our general area that we looked at. And I might hand over to Jens now to talk a bit about the side scan, if that's okay.
Yeah. Do you all hear me?
Yep. Okay. Can hear you fine.
Yeah. So my name is Jens Lindström, and I'm Swedish, live in Sweden, and I run a small company called Nordic Maritime Group. So, and we work mostly in Sweden and Finland, but we do some small jobs in Iceland and in Norway and Denmark. And we specialize in marine archaeology and remote sensing and science and sonar surveys, looking for cultural heritage. So we see this picture. We are sitting in the survey vessel. and using this towfish. It's a side-scan sonar. So I don't know at all if you're familiar with the underwater remote sensing methods, but I will give you a brief introduction. So, and you see on the right side there, you can see Kevin with his underwater, what do you call them? The orange.
I think in Icelandic it's called a vatnskikkur, so it's like
Yeah.
a water looker.
Yeah.
The bathyscope is I guess the more posh.
Bathyscope, yeah.
Basically, it lets you look through the water column.
Yeah, so that's pretty low tech, and then the side scan is more high tech. And you can take the next picture. So why what is side scan sonar? Yeah, well, so it's a geophysical instrument, and it uses sound waves, and you talk about frequencies, megahertz and kilohertz, stuff like that. And since sound travels very fast underwater, and you can't really use laser underwater since it's limited to visibility in the water, but sound travels no matter if the visibility is poor or good. And on the right-hand side, you can see that the towfish is usually towed behind a boat. You want to keep the sensors about 10 meters above the sea floor or lake floor. And then it uses echo sound techniques but it uses sideways. So that's how it catches like debris, rocks, anything sticking up above the sea floor. You get like a shadow image. And on the left side, you have the multi-beam sonar, and that's very, very good equipment for mapping sea floors and get to create nice bathymetry maps and so on. It's quite complicated, quite expensive to have the multi-beam. In Þingvellir, we used a device called single beam echo sounder. So it's actually it just uses one beam instead of 500 as on this multi-beam picture. But it gives you a pretty good overall, like pretty brief, how do you say, basic bathymetry.
Baseline, yeah.
Yeah. So here, when you look on the map, you just say, oh, it's a lake. It's not that big, but it's actually pretty big when you're in this little red, like 2.5 meter boat. And each run we did across the lake was about 1.5 kilometers or something. And I think I spent more than 20 hours in that boat going back and forth. So, but we had great weather, so I'm not complaining at all. It was a beautiful place to work in. So yeah, you can actually see the visibility is very good. You can actually see the cracks in the bedrock underneath the boat. You can take the next one. This is actually the waterfall view you get when you do sonar surveys. So you have in the middle between the red and green, you have the middle of the actually it's where the boat is going or where the towfish is being towed. And then you have the black column, and that's the water between the sensors and the seafloor. And then the orange part, that's you have the seafloor on the right side and you have the seafloor on the left side. And on this image, you have like about 50 meters of seafloor on each side. So we have the total survey corridor of 100 meters. And this is from a place in the North Sea, west of Sweden. And what we see here is it's actually trawl marks or trawl scars from fishing, from industrial fishing. And I just want to show you that, okay, when you have soft sediments, it's very easy to spot the wrecks. So this is like it's very easy. You see the wreck really stands out. You can actually see on this image, you can actually see the anchor also on the bottom. maybe Kevin, if you show with the cursor, you have it. If you have the wreck, if you move the cursor to the wreck.
Yeah, I've just moved it. I've just moved the cursor to the position there. That's the
yeah. But you can actually see small details as anchors and stuff. And unfortunately, this wreck has been trashed by a trawl. So you can actually see the trawl scar is going right through it. But the thing, when you do surveys with side-scan sonar, you have to go in pretty tight transects. So not more than, in this case, it's like 40 to 50 meters between each transect. And you do that because you want to have overlap. You want these files to overlap, so you overlap the black stripe in the middle. And when you do that, you can create mosaics and actually like a map on the bottom. And these are just examples of how shipwrecks looks like in the North Sea outside Sweden. They don't really show up like nice ships. They're more like formations. They look like almost like loaves of bread. So, but they are shipwrecks. But when it comes to Þingvellir, it's you have the bedrock, you have the lava flows, and it's a difficult environment to spot small shipwrecks or anything cultural because you have a lot of rocks that gives you very hard reflections. So in this image, you can see where it's darker brown, that means it's more soft sediments. That's like clay or silt. And when it's more brighter, like more white, it's rock, bedrock. And we can take the next.
Yeah, just what you can also see the transect lines here for the survey. So these are all stitched together. I think we counted 20 transects, so 20, and it was just under 1 hour to go across one transect. So basically over and back. So it's basically like you're cutting your garden, your lawn. They call it the lawnmower pattern.
It's about the same speed also. You go like between 3 and 5 knots. So it's actually walking. You can actually walk that fast. So, but it was interesting because what we found actually, it's this. This is a lava flow from the island of Palma in the Canary Islands. And there was an eruption there in 2021. And we had the lava flowing out in the sea. And it kinds of similar to what we found in the northern part of the lake. You can see the edge of the lava flow, and it's very. I think this eruption was about the most recent lava flow was like in 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just say the image on the right is not AI generated. It does look like it, but it's the actual image. But very similar types of things.
Yeah, and then we're supposed to spot the small shipwrecks, and this is pretty difficult. And this is the result of the bathymetry using the single beam echo sounder. So it's gives you pretty good overview of how the bathymetry is in the area. So, and for the further south we would go now, it will become much deeper. So that's the blue part is the deepest part. Yeah. So I think you, Kevin, you can take over.
Yeah. So this image here shows the sonar targets that we picked up to follow, to ground truth, basically. So having done your sonar run, and the next step then is data review, and all of our evenings were spent basically looking through the raw data collected to pull out something out of it. Okay, so again, it's easier in areas where there's less rock and less reflective things to see objects, potentially cultural objects. And what are we looking for when we're pulling out targets is the next slide here. So here you have I just picked a few of the 15 targets. I won't go through all of them because we don't have time, but this is kind of a good idea of how we went about choosing targets. So you have the target here, and then there's a close-up of it here, and then is our ROV. So we sent our little drone down on this occasion to check the target, and that's what we found down below. This is how this is represented on the sonar, just as these strong white linear lines here. This could, in another situation, could be the edge of a ship or part of a shipwreck or something like that. But here it's these linear rock formations. And, I think after a while we started to kind of get a better sense of, what could be something and what is definitely geological. But, when you start out doing this, everything looks potentially cultural until, you test several of them and you realize actually they're not. So this one here is actually a wreck. So we did actually find a wreck. I would say it's a boat wreck more than a shipwreck. But this one actually we didn't find on the sonar scan. And I mean, maybe Jens, you could outline why that was.
Yeah, well, it's actually in a cavity kind of, and we saw this while passing it with the boat. So we just looked down in the in the water, and it's a wreck. So it was more or less coincidence that we saw this one.
Yeah. So this wreck it's small. This is 4 meter long, 2.5 meters wide. It's at 5 meters deep, and like Jens said there, it was lying in a natural hollow in the lake bed, and it looks like we followed this up with a diving inspection actually, and it looks like it's inverted actually as well. So it's kind of turned upside down, if you know what I mean, where the keel is facing up towards the surface, and that's really all that was left of it is what you see here. It looks like it was metal sheeted, metal sheeted hull. All of that is gone, disintegrated. There's some framing left, and then a little part of some strakes and a little part of the keel. We weren't able to accurately date it, but I think it's nothing older than early 20th century, that sort of date. I did talk with Einar Simonson, the park director, about potential wrecks in the lake, and he had mentioned a boat called the Grímur Geitskor, and that it sank in the 30s in Þingvallavatn. But I think this one is too small to be that. But it may be associated with it. It's in the right area, I would say, of the lake. And that wreck is just here where my cursor is there. So yeah, there's a close-up picture here. You can see the outline of it here. So that's pretty much where all the sheeting has disintegrated, and here's the keel here, just lying across the bottom. I put in a picture just this morning of the Grímur Geitskor. I don't think it's the same boat. It's the one we have is too small, but it may be a boat that they were towing or whatnot. I'm not exactly sure, but this boat potentially then is still out there to find. So that could be another target for us to chase next time.
Do you know why it sank?
No, I don't.
No,
it could be few different reasons, but this one here is another sonar target that we looked at. Here's a diver here. I think that's me actually in the shot. We're inspecting it again, natural geological formation, but you can see here the sonar signature that we followed up on. So I mean, you could probably have made 100 different targets to look for during the survey, but we had limited time, resources, so we just had to choose the ones that looked like they were something, if you know what I mean. This is just to give you an idea of the visual clarity. We weren't as basic a technique as that is. Doing that in a place like Þingvallavatn is very impactful and effective, because the visibility in the water column is up to 100 meters. And this was actually how we found the wreck, that little boat wreck. Here's actually a phone photo through this bathyscope. You can see the wreck on the bottom there. It's 5 meters deep. You actually didn't need this instrument to see the wreck, though. You could see it through the water column on the bottom. Middle shot is just an idea of the visibility here. And this is just a little video showing visibility. You know, as we were driving along in the boat, we would just take time to look around us, basically. And I think, you know, that was a very effective way of us to find things. Yeah, again, just showing the visibility. You know, optimum conditions, that was the other thing that this week we had. We just had the best conditions for pretty much the whole week, which just allowed us to cover such a massive area quickly. This is just giving an idea of the diving setup we had. So, you know, as well as using the ROV and visual survey, we had our diver inspections as well. You're never going to replace, I wouldn't want to replace the human element in these projects. And, you know, having a human view on the targets is worth quite a lot, you know. And, you know, we had a setup where the diver would descend, inspect, come back and then report back the findings to the team in the boat. And you know, we found that quite an effective strategy, actually. So this shot here is right on the edge of our survey area, on the southern edge, I would say. So if we move back now, time check here, we're running quite low on time, so I'll swiftly move on. This was the area 3, so this was the submerged farm area around Váskot and Vetlankatla. So Váskot I'll just talk about today. So this was land submerged up to 4 meters through seismic activities. The farm itself there was abandoned, I was saying earlier, 1966, but there is records that, you know, show evidence of settlement from the 17th century. So there's a lot of monuments today on the surface, mostly from the 19th century. And this area has also seen a tremendous amount of seismic activity, especially during the 18th century. So in 1784, there was an earthquake thought to be 7.1 on the Richter scale in this area. 1789 is the you know, date of note for apparently there was a 10-day earthquake here in this area, and the land subsided by 1 meter within 24 hours. That's the statistics that we're going off. Gunnar Grímsson's work has done some work here back in 2020, and he was, you know, mapping features with the drone and trying to link in this underwater wall feature. So this is this stone wall feature I'll talk about now. You can see on the right image there's a lot of features and sites already registered around Váskot. So it's not surprising there could be some submerged features given the land subsidence, you know. Here's a drone shot we have at Váskot looking back out to the lake. And this one we were trying to basically follow the line of one of the submerged features on the land. Okay, and I think it's this line here. And this is an aerial view image of this feature. So I'm tracing it with my mouse here. So this is a rock wall, extends from the land about 70 meters. It's curving northeast to southwest orientated. Follows the line of a farm boundary wall on land. So we ended up calling this Denker's Wall after one of the project team members, and this is where we spent a day or so just doing some recording. It lies at a depth of 2 to 2.8 meters, so it's extremely shallow. It's very hard to see it though when you're on the ground surface. You have to be above it really to be able to find, or underwater to find it, to see it properly. This is just some images of us on land here, tracking the line of it. So it does exist on land as well, and This is just a shot here of us doing some exploring at Vaskot. This is a very tricky, like I would say, it's more difficult to do shallow water diving than deep water diving, mainly just because of trying to stay below the water is really tricky here in less than 2 meters of depth. You need quite a lot of weight to keep you down, and the problem then you have is sediment. So the lake bed, although it is extremely good visibility, here you have the diver from above here. The sediments in the lake are very fine, and it's highly mobile as well. So one kick from a fin and you have zero visibility. So, you know, it's as much as it's an amazing environment because of visibility, it's also very tricky, I would say. Here you just see the tip of the wall here extending out on the top of the photo. So basically we just were recording the wall. We 3D recorded it and assessed it for further works later on. Here you see it here. You know, it originally was probably a lot higher than it is. It's about 2 to 2.5 meters wide at its widest point. Here you just see the drone just in the top of the shot here, the underwater drone. Along it you have actually lake sediment, you know, sitting up against it, partially overlapping some of the stones as well. So this is potential for further research to actually look at this relationship and to see if we can actually pinpoint an approximate date for the structure or not. This is the 3D record we made of it, and we actually trialed a few different techniques. Here you see this peat layer here that I showed in the previous shot, in this shot here. So we actually trialed a few techniques to record it. We used, you know, a GoPro with a diver swimming over, and we also used ROV actually to swim over it as well. And I think this one was created out of the ROV, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, again, they're very useful tools for recording bigger areas. We were also playing around at the time. I don't have more details than this image here, but at the time, one of the team members, John McCarthy, he was playing around with 3D reconstruction of the environment and basically taking the data that we were capturing through drone and underwater survey, and, you know, visualizing that at different stages. So he could pull the water layer back or raise the land level slightly depending on the period we were, you know, focused on. So I think, you know, this work isn't finished. This is just, you know, ongoing, and hopefully we can get back to some of this later on. But this would allow you to visualize the area at different geological periods, which I think is quite cool, and combine in the cultural evidence as well. One of the huge problems, though, and coming back to it, is the navigating the geological features and excluding them as cultural remains. So, like, this is just one example, but I thought it was interesting. So here you have, you know, a rock wall here. Well, I won't call it a wall, but just a rock formation here, which in, you know, many other locations would be, you know, archaeological, or could potentially represent cultural remains, just of a stone wall or whatnot. It's a right angle here, very regular. And what we found was that the lake bed is full of these features. So that presents its own challenge in terms of discounting or including for survey later on, and how much time you spend trying to unpick the geology versus cultural potential cultural remains. But anyway, this was a very challenging aspect for us, and I think this is also encountered on terrestrial in terrestrial environments as well. It's not just underwater. But what's next? So basically, we've just outlined, you know, the non-invasive side of things. Ideally, the next stage would be to actually test trench that stone wall above and below, so terrestrial and underwater, and to obtain some dating evidence, either radiocarbon or tephra, maybe a tephra sample, and also to return to the areas 1 and 2, so the fissures. I think the river actually has more potential for further for cultural remains. So potentially return to the river areas on a later project, and also continue deeper remote sensing into the lake. So we have put in an application actually this season for the Forminjasjóður fund. So fingers crossed with that. This was just the project team here on the left. Gunnar Grímsson isn't in the photo, but he did, a lot of his work was done prior to our project, actually, the remote sensing project on the ground, the underwater aspect of it. Really want to thank the rangers and staff, the national park, provided us incredible assistance. We had also assistance from the Félags in Akranes, just some equipment, particularly our research vessel, and of course our funding from the Forminjasjóður and Minjastofnun, and their advice as well was great. That's kind of the project in a nutshell there, and that's the last slide here. So thanks very much for listening to us go on about this, and I hope you have some questions for us.